Welcome back to our Shir in Likutei Siches, Volume 12. Today we will learn the one Sicha for Parshat Tzav. It is a Sicha analyzing a Rashi. So again, I urge you to stop the recording before we go further and to check the Rashi in Chapter 7, Posuk 12, Perek Zayin, Posuk Yud Beis. Go through the Rashi. It is also worthwhile to go through Tehillim, Kapitel Kuf Zayin, chapter 107 in Tehillim, which in Chabad we recite every Erev Shabbos before Mincha, because the Baal Shem Tov taught that spiritually a person goes through all the experiences described in that chapter during the days of the week, and on the Shabbos he kind of arrives at a safe harbor, and that's his thanks to Hashem for having guided him safely through all these travails. So we say it every Friday. It should be familiar, but look over the chapter before we begin learning the Rashi. A second word of introduction. Since the Rashi is on the posuk that talks about the Korban Toido, the Thanksgiving offering, a few words of introduction about the Korban Toido, what was special and different about it, and how that will reflect in our study of Rashi. The Korban Toido was a Korban Shlomim, a peace offering, which meant that everybody had a share. The Mizbeach, representing Hashem's share, and on the Mizbeach were placed the different kinds of fat of the animal, and the kidneys of the animal with the fat attached to it. Different fats from inside the animal were burnt on the Mizbeach. That's, so to speak, Hashem's share. Then there's the Kohen's share. The Kohen would get from a Korban Shlomim, he would get the Chozeh V'Shoik, the breast, kind of what's known as breast of beef. So he would get the breast, which is the part of the animal. When the animal's standing, it faces the ground from approximately near the neck down to the hind legs. Not exactly, but approximately. So that section of the meat of the animal, together with the right thigh of the animal, was the Kohen's share. And the rest of the meat of the animal was the owner's share. That's a normal Korban Shlomim. A Korban Toido is the particular kind of Korban Shlomim which was offered by a person who needed to thank Hashem for an event that happened in his life, which was dangerous, and from which he's spared, so now he's thanking Hashem for granting him life and not having succumbed to the circumstances which he had gone through. Now, the Korban Shlomim was different in a few ways. Mainly, the Korban Shlomim is an animal, but it was accompanied by 4 different kinds of bread. Of those 4, one was chometz, and I'll describe it in a moment. The other 3 kinds were matzah. They were not allowed to rise, which is the norm for offerings. They don't contain chometz. They are not they're not assisted to rise through the use of yeast or sourdough or anything else that would make them rise. That's normal. The surprising thing about the Korban Toidah is that it also contained chometz. So one kind of bread was a chometz roll, or it probably looked a little bit like a chasana challah. The other three kinds of bread were all matzah, but prepared three different ways. One was prepared. When I say one, I'll explain what I mean. One type was prepared like a baked loaf. The other type was prepared as a thin cracker or wafer, something like a matzah, but it had oil. It was crunchy, but it was moist. The third kind was prepared like a donut. A donut is made by first boiling in water and then cooking in oil. So here too, the flour was it was hosed down kind of with boiling water, which is called chalito, and then it was placed in hot oil to cook there, and it came out pretty much like a donut. Now, the way these were prepared is like this. The balabos, the owner who brought the korban, would also bring 2 ephos. Now, in order to understand what's an ephah, we'll work with 1/10 of an ephah, because Rashi in Parshat Beshalach, where the postuk describes how much was the portion of mon, it said that it was the oimer lo echod, an oimer per person. How much is an oimer? Says the postuk right at the end of Parshas, the Parsha of the mon, v'oimer asiris ho'efohu. The oimer was 1/10 of an ephah. In the Beis Hamikdash, the measuring bowl in which they measured the flour for a korban mincha or for the offering, like these breads offered on the Mizbeach, each one was an isoroin, 1/10 of an ephah. The isoroin, asiris so ephah, Rashi says there in Parshat Beshalach, is the size of 43 and a fraction eggs. So if you put 43 eggs together, and then you mix them, let's say, with water, and then they rise, so the result would be approximately like a chasana challah, like the challah they put in front of a chosn. So in the case of the toidah, the chometz bread was 10 loaves looking like the chasana loaves. Each one of them consisted of 1 isoroin, 1/10 of an ephah of flour together with water, and that's what it was mixed with, also with oil. That was the chometz. Now the matzah ones were 30. There were 3 times as many as the chometz. Chometz had 10 loaves. The matzah had 30 loaves. Of those 30 loaves, 10 were prepared like loaves. 10 were prepared like rikikin, like crackers or wafers. They were pretty chunky wafers, but they looked flat like wafers, and the other 10 were round like donuts. So there's 30 loaves, and those 30 loaves are prepared from the same amount of flour as the chometz ones. The chometz ones were 10 esroinim, 10/10 of an ephah, for a total of a full ephah of flour, and the matzah ones were from an ephah of flour divided into 10 esroinim. because, like I said, the measurements of flour in the mikdash were all tenths of an ephah. Now, if you get 30 loaves from 10 estroinim, 10 that look like wafers, and 10 like loaves, and 10 like donuts. So if you take 30 loaves out of 30 loaves out of 10 esroinim, it works out to about 3 loaves per isoroin. So for 1/10 of an ephah that they prepared, they made out of that 1/10 3 of whichever particular kind of bread, matzah bread, that they were supposed to make to accompany the korban toida. When the person brought his korban toida, he would take 1 loaf of the chometz, one loaf of the matzah, 1 of the crackers, 1 of the donuts, so 4 of one of each kind of loaf, and together with the chose and the shoik, together with the breast of the animal and the thigh of the animal, and together with the fats which would go under mizbeach. So the balabos, the owner of the animal, would lift it up as an offering to Hashem together with the kohen. They would lift it up and wave it side to side. That's called a tnufa. And then the different parts went in different directions. The fat went on the mizbeach, as I said before. The chos of the the breast and the thigh, went to the kohen. The rest of the meat, the owner could eat together with his family anywhere in Yerushalayim. So it comes out, you have a lot of meat here and you have a lot of different breads. So it comes out that this was like a Suda Soidoah. So the person who had experienced something for which he wanted to give thanksgiving brought his family to Yerushalayim, he invited his friends, he made a feast, a Thanksgiving feast, which is the source of our Suda Soidoah, which we practice nowadays. So between everybody, they ate up the bread and the meat, and it was quite a meal. Now, here comes the other difference between the Korban Toida and any other Shlomim. Every other Korban Shlomim had a period of time in which you can eat it, which consisted of 2 days and 1 night. In other words, if he offered the Korban on Sunday, he had that day to eat it, that night, and the following day until sunset. That's with a regular Korban Shlomim. But with a Korban Toida, and being that the Korban Toida was eaten as a festive meal with a person's family and friends, so there's a shorter consumption time. Yom v'layla ad chatzos, a day, and that night until midnight. That's the period of time that you need to eat the Korban Pesach by. So you bring it in the daytime, and sometime through the day you would start the feast, and by midnight it would be finished, and you would have consumed whatever was meant to be consumed from the Korban Toida and the breads that go with it. Those are the basic differences between a Korban Toida and other Shlomim, as described in the Rambam in the 9th chapter of Hilchos Maaseh HaKorbanos. Now let's move on to the Rashi. The Pasuk says that Zois Toiras Zevach HaShlomim. This is the law of a Korban Shlomim, a peace offering. That's the first Pasuk. Next Pasuk. Im al toido yakrivenu, if a person offers the Shlomim as a thanksgiving offering, then the Pasuk goes on to describe how he must offer it, what he must raise, what raised up with the kohen, what he must bring together with the korban, the different kinds of bread, etc. Rashi comments on the words, the beginning of the second postuk, im al toido yakrivenu, if the person is offering the korban as a toida, as a thanksgiving offering. And Rashi explains, im al dvar hoido, if it's for a matter of thanks, al neis shenas seloi, for some miracle which occurred to the person who's bringing the korban. Kigoin, for example, yoyde hayom, those who go down to the sea in ships, v'hoilchein mitboriois, those who travel in the desert, v'chavushe beiso asurim, those who are trapped, those who are confined in a jail, or a person who was sick and he's healed. Just one little comment. I said those who go down to the sea in ships, that's the language in Tehillim. But Rashi actually doesn't bring the word ships for the reason which we'll learn about a little bit later. So if the person is bringing the Korban Shlomim as a thanks for any one of these four events, either he was a seafarer, or he traveled the desert, or he was imprisoned, or he was sick and now he's healed, and that's why he's thanking Hashem and bringing the Korban Toida as his thanks. Those four occasions, shekosu bohen, about which is written in Tehillim, chapter 107, Yoidu LaHashem chazdoi, they, the people who go through these events, and the postuk is repeated 4 times for each event. Yoidu LaHashem chazdoi, they will thank Hashem or acknowledge Hashem for his kindness, v'nifla oistov, and they will declare Hashem's wonders, livnei odom, before the children of men. In other words, a person who's thanking Hashem shouldn't keep it private, but he should make it public. He should announce to others that he's thanking Hashem, which is the source for the fact that when we say the brocha hagoimel today, which is our way of thanking Hashem for these, saving us from these events, we need a minyan. Because it says, Nifla'ois of Levnei Odom, they shall recount Hashem's wonders before people. So Rashi continues, if the person is bringing the Shlomim for one of these 4 events which he was saved from, im al achas me'ele nodar Shlomim alolu, if it was for one of these events that he donated the Shlomim, Shalmei Toidohein, they have a new name, they are Shlomim of thanksgiving. Lechem ha'omor be'inyen, and they require the bread, the different kinds of bread, which are spoken about in this parsha. That's one special thing. And the other special thing, ve'enon necholin elo leyoim v'olaylo, they may be eaten only for the day and the night, kemoi shemefurish kan, as is explicit here in the parsha. That's the Rashi. Now the Rebbe has several kashas. Rashi narrows down the occasions for which a person would bring a korban toida to 4. First of all, he narrows it down to a nes, to some miraculous salvation, and of these miraculous salvations, he narrows it down to 4 possibilities: seafarers, desert travelers, prisoners, sick people who are healed. So the Rebbe asked, the word toida means simply thanksgiving. So where does Rashi get it from in Pshuta Shel Mikra that it's for a miraculous event that the person is thanking Hashem? The Rebbe goes further. Even if for some reason you say that it's for a miraculous event that happened, how do we know it's these 4 events? Even if somehow you could prove that it's specifically for these 4 events, why does Rashi here in our posuk where it simply said if a person is bringing a thanksgiving offering, then these are the laws. Why does Rashi have to go into it over here to describe all four of the events for which a person could bring a korban toidah? Especially since Rashi says these four events about which it's written in Tehillim, chapter 107, that one must thank and acknowledge Hashem for. So you can look in chapter 107 and you'll see what those events are. That's the way Rashi usually does it. Also, why does Rashi come back after specifying the four kinds of events for which a person would bring a korban toidah? Rashi comes back and says, if for one of these events he donated this korban shlomim, then they are shalmei toidah, thanksgiving shlomim. That's the simple meaning of the word im al toidah yakrivenu, if the person will offer the shlomim for a toidah. Then the Rebbe goes into the specifics of the order in which Rashi brings these four events, which is not like the Pasuk and not like the Gemara. The Gemara brings one order, and the reason for the order in the Gemara is because the Gemara talks about those which are most common. The Pasuk brings another order, the greatest danger down to the least danger. Rashi takes neither order, neither the most dangerous first, nor the most common first, and he brings the order of seafarers, desert travelers, prisoners, and a sick person who is healed. Why does Rashi deviate from this order? Another few fine points that the Rebbe asks, why does Rashi talk about a sick person who was healed in the singular, whereas seafarers in the plural, desert travelers in the plural, prisoners in the plural? Only the sick person who was healed is singular. Why? And the Rebbe proceeds to explain based on one basic principle. Pasha Tzav talks about specific laws of individual types of korbanos. Now, all these korbanos were already enumerated in the previous Pasha Vayikra. And in Pasha Tzav, the Torah seems to come back and start all over again. For example, the beginning of the Pasha, Zois Toiras To'oilo. This is the law of the burnt offering. And then this is the law of the sin offering. And here, this is the law of the shlomim of the peace offering. What's happening? We learned about them before. So Rashi explained at the very beginning of the Pasha concerning the burnt offering, the oilo, that indeed we've learned about it, but Pasha Tzav comes to add details and aspects of the korban, each korban, which were not stated when the korban was introduced in Pasha's Vayikra. And that's the meaning of Zois Toiras. This is the law of korban X. This is the law, the particulars of which were not spelled out earlier in Pasha's Vayikra. Now let's look at the pasuk which introduces the law of the shlomim. Remember, the first pasuk says, "Tois Toiras Zevach HaShlomim." This is the law of the peace offering korban. Does it say anything about what to do with the shlomim? More than we had in Pasha's Vayikra? No. All it says, the next pasuk, Im al toido yakrivenu, if he's going to offer a thanksgiving offering. So Torah seems to start off with a korban shlomim and then change direction in the next pasuk and start talking about a thanksgiving offering. So what's going on? Therefore, The whole postuk, Zois Toira Zevach HaShlomim, this is the law of the Korban Shlomim, seems unnecessary and out of place. Unnecessary because Torah doesn't seem to add anything about the Shlomim, and out of place because, as I said, there's a jarring switch between this is the law of the Shlomim and suddenly we're talking about the Thanksgiving offering. So in order to remove that strangeness, Rashi comments and says, Im al dvar hoido, if it was for a thanks, that nodar shlomim halolu, that he pledged this korban shlomim, then it's a special category of shlomim. It's called shalmei toido. And because it's a special category, the laws are different regarding the bread that accompany it and regarding the time allocated to consume it. So Rashi is telling us that in fact there is a detail which wasn't given in Parshas Vayikra, a detail in Korban Shlomim, and that is that if it's offered as a thanksgiving, if that Shlomim is offered as a thanksgiving, then it requires the bread and it requires it to be consumed more quickly in a day and a night as opposed to 2 days and a night. So it flows on. If this Shlomim was offered as a thanks, then the law of this Shlomim is such and such. How does Rashi know to learn it that way? Because the Pasuk says, Im al toido yakrivenu. If the person will offer the korban shlomim as a toido yakrivenu, if he will offer it, it doesn't say if he will offer, but if he will offer it, namely the korban shlomim, which was mentioned in the previous pasuk. So the pasuk here is going on to explain the specifics of korban shlomim, that there's a special category of shlomim which is brought when it's offered as a thanksgiving. And that's why Rashi quotes the words Im al toido yakrivenu in his Dibur HaMaschil, in his citation from the Pasuk. It would seem that Rashi is only explaining the word toido. Why did he bring Im al toido yakrivenu? Because the way we know that we're talking about a subcategory of a shlomim and that the Torah is specifying dinim in the korban shlomim is from the word yakrivenu. He will offer it. The korban mentioned before, the korban shlomim. That's why Rashi brings the yakrivenu. Now, this explains the basic idea of Rashi. Now the Rebbe says, Rashi wouldn't have to carry on stating the different events for which a person offered a korban toido, but having said that the person brings a korban as a thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rashi adds it in order to clarify something. Every day, there are dozens and hundreds of things for which a person ought to thank Hashem. There are innumerable things for which to thank Hashem. If a person believes, every Yid believes, that all that he's got, even though he earned it through natural ways, it comes from Hashem. So, as Avraham Avinu said when wayfarers came by his tent and he fed them, when they finished eating and drinking, they turned around, they wanted to thank Avraham Avinu, and Avraham Avinu said to them, do you think you've eaten my food? You've eaten from Hashem's food. Praise and thank Hashem whose food you've eaten. So every meal is an occasion for a thanks. Everything we've got is an occasion for thanks. So a person would end up bringing korban toidos dozens of times a day. That's unthinkable. So So even in Pshuta Shal Mikro, being that we see that a Korban Tomim is a Korban Toida is the once in a while Korban, clearly it's not for everything that we thank Hashem that we bring the Korban as a thanksgiving offering. So it must be for an event which is not regular, not every day. So that's why Rashi says, if he's bringing the Korban as a thanks for a nace that happened to him, something miraculous, so there's still a problem. Because Yidden are living miraculously day by day when Hashem is instructing them about the Korban Torah. Every day they're eating of the mon, miraculous food from heaven. Every day they're drinking the water from Be'er Shel Miriam, from the rock which gave forth water for them to drink. Every day they're surrounded by clouds of glory, which makes them impervious to all kinds of attacks, whether of an enemy, whether of snakes or wild animals. They're impervious to it. That's another miracle. So they're eating and drinking and living miracles all the time. So they should have to bring a Korban Toida all the time. Surely then we must say that it's not for every single miracle that a person brings a Korban Toida. There must be specific kinds of miracles, which, being that we see in Tehillim chapter 107, that the Torah says, let them, the people who went through certain events, give thanks to Hashem and acknowledge Him. And Torah in the capital in Tehillim enumerates 4 different kinds of events. So it stands to reason that since we must narrow down the occasions for which a person brought a Korban Toida, on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have a postuk in Tehillim telling us when a person has to thank Hashem, so we put the two together, and therefore we understand that when the Torah said, if you're bringing a thanksgiving offering, it's for one of these 4 events mentioned in Tehillim. Now, in chapter 107, at one of these occasions out of the 4, it says, "V'yizbechu zivchei soido." They who experience this will bring offerings of thanksgiving. V'yistapru ma'asov berino, and they will declare Hashem's deeds with song. So only at one of the 4 does it say they will bring a Korban Toida. The fact that they should thank Hashem, Yoidul Hashem Chazdo, is written about all 4. But the posuk about Korban Toida is only said about the person who was healed from his sickness. So you might misunderstand that in fact it's only the recovered patient who has to bring a Korban Toida. Therefore Rashi specifies, no, it's all 4 categories of those which are spelled out there in that Perek in Tehillim. All 4 of them have to bring a Korban Toida. He doesn't even say, as the posuk says, Choilish in Israpo Chulu. Let him say one of them, the one who is healed from his sickness, etc., to allude to all the others. No, because the patient who was healed is toward the end. It's not the first one. Therefore, I might think that the etc. refers only to those which follow the one about the sick patient, the recovered patient. So he has to specify the earlier ones. So he already specifies all 4. Why in this order? The Rebbe comes up with a novel idea. If you're telling somebody that he should thank Hashem for a specific kind of event, it would stand to reason that you would relate the event to something in the life of the one whom you're instructing to bring a korban toida when he experiences this event. Otherwise, it's kind of detached. So you're telling a person, bring a korban toida when you experience a life-changing, a life-threatening event like the one that you experienced. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu did here in the parsha of Korban Toida. Yidden experienced 3 out of the 4 events which a person brings a Korban Toida for. Not that they brought a Korban Toida, but they experienced it, and therefore they could better relate to the fact that one would thank Hashem for saving him from this experience. What were the 3 out of the 4 that they experienced? They crossed the sea, the Yam Suf. Afterwards, they traveled through the desert. After beginning to travel through the desert, they were decreed to have to stay in the desert. They could not come out until after 40 years, and it was the next generation that came out of the desert and went to Eretz Yisrael. So they were locked up in the desert. So again, they experienced those who go down to the sea. By the way, there's no ships here, which is why Rashi doesn't bring the ships from the example in Tehillim. So they went down to the sea. They are desert travelers. They are locked up in the desert. That's the sequence in which they experienced it, and that's why Moshe Rabbeinu is telling them, and Rashi is mentioning in that order. Moshe didn't specify which events, but Rashi is explaining the events based on the Perek in Tehillim in the order in which Yidden experienced it then. The 4th category, the recovered patient, was not commonly experienced by all the Yidden of the time. And that's why Rashi switches from the plural. He uses the plural for the seafarers and the desert travelers and the prisoners, but the singular for the recovered patient. So the Rebbe asked before why. Now we understand. The other 3, the first 3, they all experienced together collectively. So Rashi says it in the plural. The 4th one is not what they experienced as a collective. So it's an individual occurrence. So Rashi says it in the singular. Now, with that alone, we cannot suffice. So the Rebbe, there's a difficulty. Why don't we consider their being slaves in Egypt as one of the events? They already experienced the prison while they were enslaved by Egypt. They couldn't get out. So why doesn't Rashi bring that first? So the Rebbe said this will be understood based on Rashi's precise expression, Chavushe beis hoasurim, those who are bound up in a prison. Why is it necessary to say that they're locked up in a prison? Just say that they were imprisoned. That means that they were locked up. No. But what Rashi wants here is that he was locked up, but where? In a beis hoasurim, specifically a jail, not under house arrest. A person can be locked up at home too. We all know this very well from what we're going through these days. A person can be locked up at home. But if he comes out of his house arrest, he doesn't stay hagoimel. he wouldn't bring a korban toido is specifically those who were jailed. Now, in Egypt, Yidden couldn't get out of Egypt, but Egypt wasn't one big prison. It's not a place which, as described in Tehillim, a person lives in darkness and in the shadow of death. That wasn't the experience of Yidden in Egypt. On the contrary, they were given the choicest of the land of Egypt, the land of Goshen. The fact that they were enslaved, they were made to work for the Egyptians. That's a separate event. It's not one of the four. It's not that they were imprisoned. Where were they imprisoned and they couldn't get out? In that desert which they were forced to stay in for all those 40 years, that became like a prison. It is indeed a place of darkness, a place of the shadow of death, because, as the Pasuk says in Dvorim, that Hashem led them through the great awful desert with snakes and serpents and scorpions, a place of thirst where there's no water. So the fact that they're confined to the desert resembles being confined in a jail. So that's what Rashi brings as the third one. And here the Rebbe launches into a discussion about whether we can or cannot consider the experience in Egypt as an imprisonment. Why should we say it is? Because the Alter Rebbe writes in his Shulchan Aruch that it's customary in European countries that the three matzahs which we used at the Seder are all made from one batch of a tenth of an ephah, 43 fraction eggs, as described before. We make all three matzahs out of the 1/10 of flour. Why? So that they should resemble the korban toido, where they made three different kinds of matzah bread, as described before, out of each one out of a tenth of an ephah of flour. So what's that got to do with this Seder? Because, said the Alter Rebbe, someone who emerges from jail has to bring a korban toido, and on Pesach we emerge from Egypt, which is like a jail, from the enslavement by Egypt. Therefore we make a remembrance, something by which to remember the korban toido. Aha! So the Alter Rebbe is saying that being in Egypt was like a jail. So we're back to the question. So why doesn't Rashi bring that as an example of the first experience, that the first one should be those who are freed from jail? So the Rebbe, that would be a good question, but really the question is the other way. If we're doing this matzah baking from one Isoroi, as a zeichet of the korban toido, as a remembrance of the korban toido, then we shouldn't be doing it on Pesach at all. Why not? The korban toido, as we learned before, was unique in that it also included chometz. All the other flour offerings that were brought in the Beis Hamikdash, except for Shavuos, all of them were pure matzah. They were thick, chunky matzah, but they were all matzah. They didn't rise. On Pesach, therefore, one didn't bring a korban toida because it was chometz. As a matter of fact, the custom of staying mizmor lestoida every morning after Baruch She'omar is discontinued on Pesach. In fact, from Erev Pesach, because you wouldn't have the required day and night in which to consume it. So the whole Pesach and the day before, we don't say Mizmeles Toido, because we don't want to mention a korban which was associated with chometz, even verbally, on Pesach, when chometz is totally out. So here, we're not only mentioning verbally, but we're doing an action which recalls the korban toido by making the three matzahs of the seder in a particular way in order to recall the korban toido. How does it fit? Says the Rebbe. Actually, there are two parts to this custom and two shittahs, two views on what the meaning of this custom is. One was said by the Rosh Rabbeinu Osher from the 1300s, and the other one, the Mordechai ben Hillel of Germany in the 1200s. Each one brings the custom with slight differences. The Rosh says that we need 3 matzahs on the night of the Seder, so that we have 2 complete matzahs, lechem mishnah. We always say hamoitzi on 2 whole rolls or chalas. So Yom Tov is no exception. Pesach is no exception to every Yom Tov. And we need to stay hamoitzi on 2 matzahs. The third one is the broken one. And when we say the Haggadah, we say it over a broken matzah, because that recalls the poverty and the affliction which our forefathers went through in Mitzrayim. Who eats a piece, not a whole loaf? It's a poor person or a slave. He gets a portion. He doesn't have the luxury of a whole loaf. And therefore, the Haggadah is particularly recited over a broken matzah, which is called lechem oini, the bread of poverty or the bread of affliction, and it's specifically a broken matzah. So if you have to have 2 complete and 1 broken, that's 3. That's why we have 3 matzahs, says the Rosh. And then the Rosh adds that in Germany and in France, it was customary to make all those 3 matzahs out of 1/10 of an ephah as a remembrance of the korban toido, because when one comes out of jail, one brings the korban toido, and we came out of jail in Mitzrayim, etc. That's the Rosh. So again, why do we have 3 matzahs, said the Rosh? Because we need lechem mishnah, and we need a broken matzah over which to say the Haggadah. Where does the korban toidah come in? Only in the fact that all 3 are made from the same batch of flour. That's the Rosh. The Mordechai, however, writes, we need 3 matzahs to remember the breads of the korban toidah, which were 3 kinds of bread, and since a person who emerges from prison has to bring a korban toidah, therefore we want to remember the korban toidah. It's not exactly the same as the korban toidah, but at least it recalls the korban toidah by bringing all 3 from one historian, as they would the korban toidah. They made 3 matzah loaves of whatever kind out of one historian. So the difference between the way the Rosh phrases it and the way the Mordechai phrases it is that according to the Mordechai, the fact that we have 3 matzahs recalls the korban toidah. So there's a visible reminder when you look at the matzahs, you're thinking of korban toidah. But according to the Rosh, there's nothing visible on the table, on the Seder table that recalls the Korban Toida. The way we prepare it, the formula, the recipe for the matzah, is that we use one isoroin for all three matzahs, like the way the Korban Toida was made. But looking at it, nothing is noticeable that it has anything to do with the Korban Toida. So now we understand. According to the Rosh, we have no problem with recalling the Korban Toida because there's nothing visible. So of course we don't stay Mizmalas Toida, in which we mention the Korban Toida, and we don't do anything visible which recalls Korban Toida. It's secretly it's smuggled in the recipe. According to the Mordechai, one brings the three matzahs, remembering the Korban Toida. The Alter Rebbe follows the reasoning of the Rosh. So why does the Alter Rebbe say that we want to recall the Korban Toida because we emerged from prison? Not that it was actually a prison, but it resembled a prison, and therefore it's associated with the Korban Toida, not that anybody would have to bring a Korban Toida for leaving Mitzrayim, a place like Mitzrayim. The Rebbe concludes with a lesson from all this, that as long as a Yid is enslaved by Mitzrayim, in Golus, generally Golus is called Mitzrayim because it's oppressive, it's straits. As long as a Yid is found in Golus, despite all the good that we have in Golus, we still feel like we're confined in prison. So much so that it can be compared to the prison, which is a place of darkness, shadow of death, for which one brings the Korban Toida. Because the truth is that as long as one is in Golus, Hashem's presence doesn't shine through, so the godly presence within him is in a jail. In the choshech, in the darkness of the body, and the klippe of the nefesh habahamis, which is called the shadow of death. So we understand that every day a person waits and anticipates the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, when we'll be freed from this confinement with the Geula Hamitis Vashlema.